To dissect Soldier Boy's anatomy, you have to go past flesh and bone and dive into the layers of propaganda, trauma, and chemistry that make up Vought International's first and longest-lasting myth. He isn't just a man, he's a walking monument, an ideological construction forged in the fire of World War II and hardened by the cruelty of the Cold War. His story is basically the biography of corporate America itself, a shiny front of heroism and virtue that hides a darker truth of brutality, abuse, and power with zero breaks. He was sold to the world as the peak of American exceptionalism, the selfless soldier who supposedly stood toe-to-toe with Nazi evil and came home victorious. The reality? Benjamin, the guy behind the mask, was the first sacrifice on the altar of the superhero industrial complex, his body and soul, rewritten to serve something bigger and uglier. He's living proof that Compound V doesn't create heroes, it mass-produces weapons. And the deadliest part of that weapon isn't the super strength, it's the story wrapped around him, a patriotism shield as hard to crack as the metal of his iconic emblem. Soldier Boy is the foundation Vought built its empire on, and he's also the first fracture line that could bring the whole thing down. Soldier Boy's physical anatomy is the bedrock of that myth, a cathedral of muscle, bone, and tissue chemically altered to blow past human biology's limits. Injected with the original, purest strain of Compound V developed personally by Frederick Vought during the war years, his body became a biological fortress that flipped nature the bird. For decades, his strength was the yardstick every other supe got measured against, a raw power that wouldn't meet a real match until his own genetic successor showed up, Homelander. He could toss a car like it was a pebble, and his combat prowess became legendary, though a lot of it got juiced up by Vaught's PR machine. Stories about him in World War II supposedly dropping Germans by the dozen and leading infantry on Omaha Beach are disputed by people who were actually there. The legend, Vaught's archivist, claimed Soldier Boy was mostly used for propaganda films and photo ops, showing up in Normandy 2 weeks after D-Day, once the danger had already passed. Stan Edgar, Vaught's cold-blooded CEO, insisted Soldier Boy really did kill Germans in combat, and the skill he showed decades later in Nicaragua suggests at least some of that military training was legit. The way he can dominate multiple trained soldiers in seconds, mixing brutal strength with nasty close-quarters technique, is proof of how lethal he really is. And that massive shield? It's so heavy normal guys can't even budge it yet. He swings it one-handed, using it as both defense and a blunt force wrecking ball capable of cracking skulls, like he did to Black Noir. His durability borders on straight-up invincibility, and it defines him just as much as his strength does. Russian scientists spent decades trying to find the ceiling on his toughness, running him through a horror show of experiments that would make even seasoned monsters flinch. Assault rifle rounds were fired point-blank into his mouth without leaving so much as a scratch on the inside. Oxyacetylene torches were held to his skin for hours without burning it. Power saws were pressed against him and the blades snapped. Sulfuric acid was forced down his throat and he swallowed it like it was nothing. Blades were pushed against his eyes, and even his corneas proved as impenetrable as steel. Nothing worked. He could tank Homelander's strongest hits, he's the only one who can, and walk away without a visible mark. During the Herogasm fight, Soldier Boy and Homelander traded blows that wrecked walls and cracked the floor. Homelander walked away with a bruise the first time he ever showed visible damage while Soldier Boy stayed untouched. He survived a fall from the 99th floor of 7 Tower without a scratch, endured multiple heat vision attacks from Homelander, Butcher, and Ryan at the same time, and even a sustained laser blast straight to the face from Butcher, left only a small cut on his cheek that healed fast. But that invulnerability cuts both ways. It made him the perfect weapon, and it also separated him from anything human, building an unbreakable shell around a mind that kept fracturing. He doesn't feel pain the way regular people do, and that distance bleeds into everything. Empathy gets muted, and the suffering he causes becomes background noise. On top of strength and durability, Soldier Boy has superhuman stamina and speed that make him a nightmare in a fight. He can throw down for long stretches without tiring, as seen in his battles against Homelander, The Boys, and Payback. His reflexes are quick enough to react instantly, shielding himself before someone can open fire or countering mid-swing when Homelander comes at him. He also has superhuman hearing, picking up frequencies normal people can't, and a longevity that makes him effectively immortal. Even though he was born in 1919, he still looks like he's in his early 30s, thanks to the V1 strain of Compound V that slows aging to a crawl. That immortality, stacked with his invulnerability, means Soldier Boy could theoretically exist forever, an eternal witness to the crimes he helped commit and the crimes committed against him. He's also highly resistant to toxins and gases that would drop a normal person instantly. He drank a Bill Cosby spiked drink without getting knocked out, inhaled halothane like it was cigarette smoke, and was only temporarily put down by Novichok, one of the deadliest toxins on the planet, later developing resistance even to that. His body is also immune to radiation, able to withstand 20 sieverts way above a lethal dose for humans, and to endure the constant radiation his own body gives off, comparable to a nuclear reactor. If Vought sculpted his physical anatomy, the Russians refined his chemical anatomy, turning him from a super soldier into a walking nuclear bomb, a weapon of mass destruction that can't really be controlled or contained. After being betrayed by his own team, Payback, and handed over to the Soviets in 1984, Soldier Boy vanished from the world and became a lab rat in a secret facility in the Soviet Union. The betrayal was orchestrated by Black Noir at Stan Edgar's request because Edgar decided it was time to retire Soldier Boy. Vought believed they'd made something more powerful and more useful to the company, Homelander. Payback, who'd spent years eating Soldier Boy's physical and psychological abuse, basically jumped at the chance to dump their tyrant leader. During a surprise attack by the Sandinistas and their Soviet allies in Nicaragua, Payback used the chaos to ambush him. Even though he fought like hell, burning part of Noir's face and causing brain damage with his shield, he was eventually knocked out with Novichok and delivered to the Russians. Vought covered up his death by claiming he died heroically, stopping a nuclear meltdown in Ohio, a lie the public bought for nearly 40 years. The decades of torture and relentless experimentation that followed, including the insertion of radioactive material into his body on January 24, 1986, didn't destroy him. They changed him in a way even his captors didn't see coming. His body started generating its own radiation, turning him into a living nuclear reactor. That new ability shows up in the most volatile, destructive way imaginable, a radioactive energy blast he fires from his chest. The trigger is psychological trauma, basically a Pavlovian response tied to memories of his torture, often set off by seemingly harmless things, like a Russian song playing on the radio or the feeling of being trapped. When it hits, his chest starts glowing with an intense, terrifying light. He loses control, and he releases a wave of energy that tears outward in a devastating arc. The blast doesn't just vaporize regular people, turning them to ash instantly, and rip apart multi-story buildings like they're made of paper. It also has one uniquely horrifying property that makes him the single most dangerous weapon against other supes. It burns the compound V right out of their blood, effectively stripping their powers and reverting them to normal humans. That's exactly what happened to Kimiko, who temporarily lost her regeneration, and at Herogasm, where his blast depowered multiple supes including Termite, who got permanently stuck in his shrunken form. The one exception seems to be that some supes can regain their powers if they're injected with compound V again, like Kimiko later did. That makes Soldier Boy the only known weapon capable of neutralizing Homelander, the same kind of creation Soldier Boy was meant to represent, and potentially the only real shot at stopping the most powerful Supe on Earth. The irony is brutal. The first real success story of Compound V becomes the closest thing to a cure for the plague he helped unleash. A walking chemical contradiction that turns him into pure chaos. His self-detonation is even worse. A massive explosion he can unleash when he's emotionally overloaded, like when he killed Crimson Countess after finding out she never loved him. That blast would have been strong enough to destroy all of Vought Tower if he detonated there, killing nearly everyone inside. The amount of radiation he emits also shifts with his emotional state, spiking when he's stressed or shaken, making him dangerous even when he's not actively blowing up. Being around Soldier Boy for long periods can cause radiation poisoning, and his constant radioactive aura means he's literally a walking threat to everyone near him. But the most complex and most busted layer of his anatomy is psychological, a maze of trauma, insecurity, and toxic masculinity built over decades of abuse and conditioning. Benjamin was a product of toxic masculinity long before he ever became a Supe. Born into a ridiculously wealthy family in Philadelphia in 1919, he was raised by a distant, hypercritical industrialist father who owned half the state's steel mills. His dad saw him as a massive disappointment, a total failure who didn't deserve the family name, and he didn't even bother beating him because Ben wasn't worth the effort. Instead, he punished him with emotional neglect and verbal abuse. And Ben remembers sneaking his father's cocktails just to cope. His father shipped him off to boarding school early, not to make him better, but to get rid of him. Ben struggled there and eventually got expelled, which only reinforced his father's belief that he was a screw-up unworthy of carrying the name. That rejection planted something deep, a desperate need to prove himself, a hunger that pushed him to enlist in the U.S. Army during World War II and use his father's connections to volunteer for Frederick Vaught's Compound V experiments. Becoming Soldier Boy didn't get him the approval he wanted. When he came home to hero parades across the country, his father still looked at him with disgust, accusing him of cheating, of taking a shortcut no real man would take by using Compound V. That wound never healed. It festered. It shaped him and turned him into something ugly. He became the textbook bully, arrogant, misogynistic, narcissistic, abusive, projecting this loud, unearned superiority that was really just insecurity and inner conflict dressed up as swagger. His idea of masculinity warped into pure toxic macho nonsense, pushing him even farther away from real human connection, because he grew up trained to hate affection, to hate weakness, to hate vulnerability. Like his father, Ben worshipped old-school masculinity and being a man, looking down on and sometimes abusing anyone who didn't fit his standards or challenged his worldview, saying it was to toughen them up. And he kept that same attitude even after the boys pulled him out of Russian captivity almost 40 years later. As Payback's leader, he could be petty and cruel, willing to hurt anyone who challenged him and sabotage any attempt they made to build their own careers. He had no problem using his fame and power to intimidate and manipulate people for his own benefit, with black noir and gunpowder as his favorite punching bags, which makes him a child abuser, since gunpowder was a preteen at the time. You see it when he used his connections to make sure Noir didn't land a role in Beverly Hills Cop because he wasn't good enough, treating Noir's ambition like a threat, like Noir was trying to outshine him, so Ben kept himself planted at the center of attention to prove his father wrong. But that kind of behavior made the team hate him and build a deep, long-term resentment. According to Grace Mallory's account of the Nicaragua incident, Soulja Boy had this celebrity persona and wasn't used to anyone brushing him off. So when she rejected his advances, he got nasty, insulting her and talking down to her. He was also reckless, almost firing a rocket launcher without realizing he was aiming at an ammo depot that could have obliterated half the camp and drawn every enemy force in the area. And he was a straight-up womanizer. Grace said Ben couldn't read the room. He always assumed women were into his macho act when they actually couldn't stand it. Soulja Boy also figured he probably had kids out there somewhere from the 40 years he was imprisoned, which tells you he was a major playboy and constantly cheated on Crimson Countess with random girls. Those decades in Russian captivity stacked a fresh layer of trauma onto a mind that was already cracked. The fear of being locked up again, PTSD triggered by Russian music, or the feeling of confinement, and the bitterness of betrayal all made him even more unstable. When the boys tried to use a dose of Novichok to knock him out during the Vought Tower fight, he reacted with fear and rage at the thought of being caged again. He also showed a kind of naivete. He genuinely believed Crimson Countess loved him and would come save him, never realizing she hated him the whole time. He loved her and spent his imprisonment expecting she'd rescue him, so he was truly shocked and hurt when he found out she never loved him and abandoned him to the Russians for no reason other than pure hate. He also assumed she and his former teammates were paid off by the Russians to sell him out as a lab specimen, and he was stunned to learn they weren't paid at all. They did it out of spite. His meeting with Homelander, his biological son, created from sperm he donated in 1980 to Jonah Vogelbaum, is the peak of his psychological tragedy. When Soulja Boy learned Homelander was his son, he was floored. He realized Vought had greenlit Payback turning on him because they planned to replace him with a Supe made from his own DNA. That realization, plus the fact that he'd lost all the years he could have spent raising his kid, hit him hard because it made him feel like he'd failed as a father, and his own father's words calling him a disappointment came flooding back. Soulja Boy had wanted children because he believed he could raise them better than he was raised, and failing at that made him question whether he'd proven his father wrong or proven him right. When he confronted Homelander again at Vought Tower, Homelander desperately pitched an alliance, saying they were family, that regular humans were beneath them, and even revealed Ryan to make his point. In that moment, Soulja Boy saw his younger self in Homelander, erratic, privileged, insanely powerful, starving for a father's approval, and desperate for love. And he finally understood how his own father saw him, and how brutally true those words felt. So, when Homelander insists they're the same, Soulja Boy, with tears in his eyes, repeats the poison that shaped him, calling Homelander a fucking disappointment.
You're a fucking disappointment.
By doing that, he keeps the trauma cycle alive, passing the pain he inherited straight into the next generation. The real anatomy of Soulja Boy isn't found in a lab or on a battlefield. It lives at the intersection of an unbeatable body, an unstable chemical weapon, a soul shattered beyond repair, and the enduring myth of a hero who never actually existed.